So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the December 15th, 2021 regular meeting of the Historic District Commission. For those that don't know me, my name is Regan Miner and I am the chairperson. As we are continuing with the presentation, I would just ask that everybody remain muted if you're not speaking. It looks like everybody is. I appreciate that very much. So we have a unique setup of the meeting today. The first half of the meeting will be the public hearing, where we will have an information session on updating the Historic District Commission's design guidelines by our consultant, Chris Skelly. And we'll also have a public hearing on COA 477. Public comment is encouraged during this public hearing. After the public hearing portion of the meeting is over, we will then open the regular meeting where the commission discusses and votes on the COA application. Members of the public are welcome to stay for this portion of the meeting, but it is not necessary. Applicants will be informed of the commission's decision tomorrow. And please note that is not permitted, please note that the public is not permitted to provide further comment during the regular meeting portion. Any questions so far before we move on? Okay, so I wanted to give everybody a little background on how we got here today. So last year, the Historic District Commission was awarded a certified local government grant from the State Historic Preservation Office to hire a consultant to help update the design guidelines. The consultant is working with members of the commission to create a document that will be used by the commission to assist in its decisions. It will be useful to anyone who is considering work which alters the architectural features of a historic structure located in the local historic districts. So the design guidelines will be comprised of explanatory recommendations in a printed book format, and they'll also be accessible on the Historic District Commission's webpage. The design guidelines will be divided in sections highlighting various architectural elements, such as windows, porches, roofs, etc. And the design guidelines will help residents understand what proposed exterior changes the commission encourages, as well as what it discourages. It is our hope that the design guidelines are a helpful resource for homeowners here in the districts. Any questions so far? All right, great. I'd like to start by introducing our consultant and start getting into the information session. Our consultant will give a brief presentation first, and then we will open the floor to questions. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, I would recommend that you pop them in the chat, and then I can read them to Chris at the end of his presentation. So to introduce Chris, Chris Skelly has over 20 years of experience with local historic district ordinances, local historic district commissions, and local historic district administration and design guidelines. He worked at the Massachusetts Historical Commission as the Director of Local Government Programs and serves as a National Local Historic District Commission trainer with the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions. His vast experience includes creating and leading workshops on alternative materials and local historic districts, and has published guidebooks for historic district commissions and preservation plans. Chris currently lives in Western Massachusetts. So please welcome Chris Skelly. And Chris, I will turn the floor over to you.
Okay, thank you, Regan. Well, it's great to be here. Welcome, everyone. So as Regan stated, I'm a preservation consultant developing the set of design guidelines for the local historic districts in Norwich. So I'm going to put up my PowerPoint here. First slide. Okay. So as I've been putting together this draft set of design guidelines, I've made many trips to Norwich and getting to know the historic buildings here and all the resources in all the districts. Greatly enjoyed my visiting your amazing city, and I just find that Norwich has this amazing collection of historic resources here. So while my focus has really been on the local historic districts of Norwichtown and Little Plain. I spent time walking your downtown and walking through your mill villages. Just found your city to be a really remarkable place that just really stands out. Anyway, it's been a pleasure to be here and work with the district commission and enjoy your city. So this evening is our chance to talk about design guidelines, what they are, how they are used, the benefits of having them. But before we do that, some background noise there. Before we do that, I just want to spend a few minutes explaining that there are two kinds of historic districts in Norwich: National Register districts and local historic districts. And I know for those of you that were on for our first public hearing, this is just going to be a repeat, but I feel like it's important enough that we do need to go over it, just for anyone that's just joining us for tonight. So these districts shown here are just National Register districts. They are not local historic districts. They were designated by the National Park Service and placed on the National Register of Historic Places. So the National Park Service reviewed all of these districts as part of the district nomination process from the state of Connecticut, and found that these districts met the criteria for inclusion on the National Register of Historic Places. So the main thing to remember here about the National Register of Historic Places and National Register districts is that this is essentially an honorary designation. So it's an honorary designation. So these are not the historic districts that we're talking about today, even though they are known as historic districts. So today we're talking about local historic districts. So these are the districts that we are talking about today: the Norwichtown Historic District and the Little Plain Historic District. These were established by city ordinance by the Norwich City Council in the all the way back in the 1960s. So they also happen to be National Register districts, but the key thing for us today is that they are local historic districts. So these two districts were established through city ordinance in order to protect these areas from loss and destruction. This idea of protecting historic buildings through a city ordinance started in Connecticut back in the 1960s. So Norwich was, like many other cities, establishing local historic districts around that time. But this idea of actually creating local historic districts by way of a city ordinance, that actually goes all the way back to the 1930s. And the first ones in the country were established in Charleston, South Carolina, and New Orleans, Louisiana. So I'd also like to mention that these local historic districts under city ordinance review only those exterior architectural features that are visible from the public way. The city ordinance limits reviews to only what's visible from a public way, and that is the way all local historic districts are going to work throughout the country. So the way that a local historic district can help protect historic resources is that under the local historic district city ordinance, certain projects in the Norwichtown and Little Plain historic districts are reviewed by the Norwich Historic District Commission. So what can happen when you don't have a local historic district and a historic district commission? When you don't have local historic districts, well, your historic resources, buildings, can be demolished in just a few hours. When you don't have local historic districts, exteriors of buildings can be altered in just a few hours so dramatically that the building is no longer even recognizable. So buildings can be demolished and new buildings can be constructed that are not compatible with the setting of the historic buildings. All of this can happen with no community input whatsoever. So this historic village right here on the North Shore of Massachusetts is not a local historic district. So there was no review whatsoever on this new construction. So even though this new construction not compatible with this seaside village, it was constructed with no public input whatsoever. So I can tell you that this seaside village definitely started having some meetings about maybe we need to have a local historic district after this building went in. In my visits to the local historic districts of Norwich, I would say that the local historic districts have just done an amazing job of protecting this irreplaceable collection of historic buildings. It makes me wonder what might have happened to these districts over the past few decades had the city of Norwich not established a local historic districts here in Norwichtown and Little Plain. Both of these districts remain wonderfully intact historic neighborhoods. Just a little more background on local historic districts. Local historic districts are not meant to be a museum. Around the country, local historic districts are places that people live, work, run businesses. The goal of a local historic district is to guide changes, providing a means of protecting irreplaceable places while still being vibrant places to live and work, adapting to our modern world. Okay, so with that as some background, we'll just jump into the design guidelines now. So the idea with design guidelines are that they assist everyone in understanding what works in a local historic district and what does not work in a local historic district. So they provide a clear avenue for balanced changes that are thoughtful and sensitive to the historic setting of the district. And who uses the design guidelines? Well, definitely the Historic District Commission is going to use the design guidelines. So they're going to use the design guidelines when they're reviewing applications, reviewing applicable projects. But guidelines get used by all kinds of other people as well. So property owners in the local historic districts, contractors, architects, developers, all use design guidelines. Guidelines basically take out the guesswork. So once adopted, anyone looking to make an exterior architectural change in a local historic district could pick up these design guidelines and quickly understand what kinds of projects are likely to be compatible and likely to be approved. They cover various kinds of projects here. So across the country, the hundreds of different design guidelines that are out there, the local historic districts around the country, cities large and small, they're going to all follow a bit of a similar format. And the idea is to cover within the design guidelines the various projects reviewed under the city ordinance. So for instance, projects that are on this list are typically included in the design guidelines. And we have included all these things here in the design guidelines for Norwich. I'm just going to give a couple of examples of what's in the design guidelines so you can get a little sense of the wording here. I'm going to start with porches. So the porches in Little Plain and Norwichtown are just wonderfully varied, unique. They really set the stage for what makes these districts special places. And I'd say protecting these very prominent architectural features is one of the goals of the local historic districts. So alterations of a porch, such as enclosing a prominent front porch, can have very unfortunate consequences on the entire streetscape of the district. So this is not in one of the districts here, but I show it as an example of what happens when you enclose a front porch and just how dramatic that change is to the district. So we definitely included porches within the design guidelines, and the language, examples of the language that we've included in the design guidelines are right here. So preserve existing historic porches and their individual architectural features, repair deteriorated architectural features on the porch. If replacement is necessary, choose similar materials and design. Maintain the historic openness of a porch. Avoid enclosing a porch that is visible from the public way. So you can avoid things like that. So our goal with the guidelines for Norwichtown and Little Plain is to have a set of design guidelines that anyone can pick up, flip to the applicable page in the guidelines, and then feel confident moving forward with designing their project. I'll just give another example here for decks. So the goal here is to accommodate a new attached modern day structure, but do so in a way that is minimally visible from the public way so that the overall historic aspects of the districts can be maintained. And so we wrote up some language for the design guidelines that looked like this. Site decks in the rear of the property in minimally visible locations, screen decks from the public way with landscaping, avoid siting a deck in the front of the property, choose materials that are a wood product or closely replicate a wood surface. So those are just a couple of examples of the design guidelines, or what we have for language in there. I also just would say that our design guidelines, of course, are mostly all about the actual guidelines for each of these kinds of architectural features. But we have some other things in the design guidelines as well in our draft so far. So we have a brief section on the history of Norwich and the history of historic preservation, such as going back to when the ordinance for the local historic districts were established back in the 1960s. And we also have some examples of all the architectural styles, all the wonderful styles that you find in your two local historic districts. So Georgian and Federal and Greek Revival, Italianate, and so on. All those architectural styles are mentioned in the design guidelines. It's sort of the introduction part. And then we have a section on how the application process works, how the local historic district works overall, submitting an application, the kinds of things that are exempt from review, how the public hearing process works. Just a good background so that anyone, again, picking up the design guidelines and not being familiar with how the local historic district works, they can just easily flip to those introductory pages and understand what's the process that's going to take place. And then, so I mentioned earlier the distinction between National Register districts and local historic districts. So we have some text in the design guidelines that explains that difference, as that question comes up frequently, is a really confusing aspect of the words historic district. So we want to make sure we have that clarified in the design guidelines as well. Next steps. So we're in December right now. So we're seeking community input on the draft design guidelines. So if you haven't looked at them already, they are available on the Historic District Commission's webpage from the agenda page for tonight. You can download the PDF there. So then in early January, we plan on finalizing the design guidelines based on the input that we receive. And then by the end of January, we anticipate that the Historic District Commission will adopt the final guidelines by sometime later in January. And then I included one additional step here at the bottom. We don't have a date for that one just because it's really open-ended. This is an open-ended step because the guidelines can always be changed, and they really are meant to be revised and updated over time. So I don't have a date for that. An open-ended step, but it's always good to just remember your guidelines can be updated, revised at any time in the future. Okay, so with that, I would really like to hear from everyone else, any of your questions that you might have. So Regan and I are happy to answer your questions, hear your thoughts, and take notes on your input.
Great, thank you, Chris. So if anyone has any questions for Chris, you're welcome to either get off mute if that's easiest for you, or you're also welcome to pop a question in the chat, whichever is most helpful. And while we're waiting for questions, I'm just going to also put a link in the chat to directly access the draft design guidelines. So anyone is welcome to begin.
Am I on?
Yes, we hear you. And the only thing I'd also ask, if you would please just state your name before you ask your question, please. Thank you.
Yep, my name is Dr. Akis. Good evening.
Hi, Dr. Akis.
Are you
Good
there?
to have you. Yeah, we have you here.
Okay. The overall picture, where we should review the handout that about the historic district. And then do we comment on that, or is there a meeting in January, or how is the process? So we'll read it over and decide if there's some areas that we're concerned about, and we come together and before a vote on this. What's the big picture?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I'm hoping to do is I'd love it for people to look at the draft document and look it over, read it over, and send me any questions by January 5th, any questions or comments you have in the document. I'm also going to plug my email in the chat as well. And so the goal is that we would like to adopt the design guidelines at the January 19th, 2022 regular meeting. So we were hoping to get public input by January 5th and to adopt the guidelines by January 19th. So that's where we're looking to go from here.
What are the parts of the handout that is controversial? Are there any areas that should be focused in more than others?
I don't know how to answer that, Dr. Akis. I don't think anything is particularly controversial. I think we're just hoping to have the public weigh in on the document itself and just to make sure that it looks good to you and that we haven't missed anything, or if there's any questions that you've had over the years about the commission, this is a good time to ask them, and then we can discuss putting them into the guidelines. And Chris, I don't know if you have an answer to that question either.
Right.
I don't see anything that's particularly controversial in the design guidelines, but we're certainly looking for input on anything that you might have as a concern in the guidelines. I think we've really tried to write a set of design guidelines that really strikes that balance between making sure we're protecting the historic resources here, but also giving flexibility so that these places really can continue to thrive and be just wonderful places to live, work, run businesses, whatever you do.
Well, I think that's pretty historic. In the old commission, Dick Sharp, who ran the historical commission, it was more about what you saw from the road than what happened in the back. That's the same, or?
Absolutely, yes. It's only what's visible from the public way. I mean, that's actually not part of the guidelines so much. That's actually right in the ordinance. So right under the law, the district commission does not have review what's not visible from the public way.
Okay, so that really didn't change because we've lived here for 43 years, and that was always the idea. If you wanted to change your fence, you had to have permission because it wasn't the same, or change your roof, or you couldn't change anything in the front, but you could add other things in the back. So that's the same, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, there is just that area on if it is very clearly not visible from the public way, there's no review.
Correct. Okay.
All right. None of that's changed, and that's standard across the country. I mean, the thousands of local historic districts that exist since the 1930s.
Okay, so it sounds like
that's how
in
they
a
all
certain
work.
way, nothing's changing.
No.
You just want validation for things to stay the same.
So I'd say the distinction here. So nothing in the ordinance has changed because we're not.
Right.
This doesn't have anything to do with your local law for what is actually reviewed in a local historic district. To make any change there, that would actually have to go back to city council. All we're really trying to do here is provide some guidance for those things that the district commission does have review over. It's really trying to provide the guidance for the district commission and everyone else to have a much better sense of what's likely to be approved by the commission.
Yeah, well, it sounds like things didn't change a lot because, as I said, it's been that way ever since we moved here. So
Yeah,
we're all
thank you.
for it.
Great, thanks, good question.
And would you mind just stating your name for the record? I know who you are.
Oh,
but
I'm
if you
sorry,
could-
Sandra Akis.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Sandy. Thank you. So any further questions for Chris? Anyone else has any questions or comments?
I noticed Denise had a question in the chat.
Hi, yeah, I do have a question. I'm wondering how to make it easier for investors to actually put their hope and vision into. I have in the past had an interest at
Breaking
Main
up.
and Water Street, and I'm sorry.
I think we're losing you
Hi.
just a little bit, Denise. I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. I think one of the problems is that we have so many connections with other legal demands, and yet what we're trying to protect is the ground where we're walking, so to speak. Does that make any sense? In other words, the history needs to be preserved beyond all the legalities of money interests. So an investor should probably be entertained with rigor. And I think that the Carroll building has been ignored to some degree.
Yeah, so the Carroll building is located in the downtown National Register Historic District, so it wouldn't fall under these design guidelines. These are just the two local districts for Little Plain and Norwichtown.
Oh, good to know. Okay, all right. So, right.
However, it is beneficial that the Carroll building is in a National Register district because that means it would be eligible for historic tax credits. So if there was a developer looking to do something good in the property, they could take advantage of historic restoration tax credits.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate knowledge.
You're
Thank you so
welcome.
much.
You're welcome. So there was a question I saw in the chat, a way to access the document. So I am sending it again in the chat, but if everybody would like to access the draft document of the guidelines, the way it's posted is mildly confusing, so I apologize about that. But if you go to the December 15th, 2021 meeting agenda on the commission's webpage on the City of Norwich's website, it is linked to the agenda. So if you just click on the link, it will bring the document up. I'm also happy to send the document via email to anybody who is interested as well. And I will put in my email in the chat one more time, so you're welcome to contact me as well. All right, great. So any further questions for Chris or myself, or any comments?
Regan, Dr. Akis again.
Go ahead, Dr. Akis.
Hi, we went through the trauma of the Burger King, where they put it right next to the cemetery. That has been deemed, so the periphery of the historic district is always the tenuous part, right? There's less control when it's not in the historic, but it borders on it. What are your thoughts about that? The Burger King, they tried, as far as investment, they tried to make it palatable, at least aesthetically, on the outside. But clearly, it's not part of the local culture. But maybe it is, because right across the street there are restaurants. So how does that play out? And what is happening with Burger King? Because there's nothing happening. And that was put a lot of energy into that. What's it been, about 3 years now?
Yeah, so I think your question stems into zoning.
The zoning,
Discussing-
yeah.
Yeah, discussing zoning with the city planning and neighborhood services department, talking with the zoning enforcement officer, talking about how to protect historic resources that are in the local historic districts, and making sure any development or any property abutting the district is at least sensitive to the fact that there are historic resources right next door. So that would be a question, frankly, for zoning to move forward with something like that. Chris, I don't know if you have any other thoughts about that too.
Sure. One thing to think about is just for the future, for another year, is to think about a preservation plan for the city. And just, as I've explored your city, and just how amazing it is, but also recognizing, as I've explored Norwich, just how vulnerable your city is in terms of lots of losses. While you're pretty well protected in the 2 local historic districts here, just outside the local historic districts, not well protected at all. And then National Register districts, not well protected. Your downtown just came up a few minutes ago in terms of your downtown. I mean, your downtown is an amazing place, but it is very vulnerable to loss. And I think thinking about a municipal citywide preservation plan, thinking about all the different kinds of tools that are out there, whether they're zoning tools or other kind of ordinances, or a buffer zone, something like that. Yeah, here you go. Yep, all kinds of other overlay zones, or what we call conservation districts or design review areas, all kinds of things like that. And then all the tax credits and there's lots of other tools that are available in terms of really trying to think how you can maintain, invest, really support, rehabilitate lots of places throughout the city.
The other thing I'll add, Dr. Akis, to go into Chris's point a little bit, the city of Norwich is starting to work on revising the plan of conservation and development, and they're going to ultimately seek public input on that document. And there is a section in the document regarding historic resources. And so that would also be a good opportunity to talk about, an appropriate buffer zone between historic districts and commercial areas. So that would be another good opportunity to reach out to the city about how to get involved in some of those conversations regarding the plan of conservation development.
Yeah, so the intersection between historic districts and zoning issues, where and I don't know how so this would be an attempt to kind of solve that dilemma, right, of having the zoning on board with preservation, but you can't really change the zoning laws, right? I mean, if it's zoned for business, it's zoned for business, and you're up right at their whim in terms of the aesthetics of what goes in.
It's a decision of your city council. Ultimately, it's a decision of city council what areas are zoned for each use.
Right, and I mean they want more and more business, obviously, to improve the tax base and not scare away investors, as somebody mentioned. So it's just crafting
ordinances in those cases that sort of meet what your goals are. What is your goal for that area? If you would like to have businesses along that corridor, okay, well, you're gonna still have some sort of a commercial zoning district, but maybe you want to think about design review in some way so that new construction that goes in there is going to be compatible for whatever kind of look that you're wanting. So if you want to explore municipal zoning and municipal ordinances across the country, you'd see local historic districts in there, but you'd also see things like design review districts that would have some sort of design review over new construction.
Uh-huh. Okay. That's food for thought, yeah. Good, thank you.
Great, thank you, Dr. Akis. Any further questions from anybody?
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to chime in to say, big kudos to Regan and the HTC and Chris Skelly for putting together this document. I had a chance to go through it. This is Dane Rue, by the way. Excuse me, just for the record. A document like this didn't exist in Norwich, and it's extremely important to enumerate these guidelines and processes, because it protects the commission, it protects the historic districts, and there's a number of times it's easy to assume that design guidelines in historic districts exist purely to inconvenience the historic homeowners. But as a historic homeowner, I'm very appreciative of these protections, because you either have local historic districts or you don't. You either have historically significant architecture or you don't. And here in Norwich, we have such a wide, diverse array of architecture and details and historic districts. So this is a really positive step forward, and I'm very happy to see it. The document itself really,
Good job.
really exceeded my expectations in a positive way. So, and I will say too, it's quite fair. It's there's some historic districts like in Boston, some out in Massachusetts, where they give you 4 paint colors to choose from, and that's it. There's no arguing with them. This is not a negotiation. They tell you exactly what to do. So that being said, this is extraordinarily balanced, having gone through the whole piece. So anyway, very well done. Excellent job.
Thank you, Dane. I appreciate it. And thank you, Denise, as well, for the kudos in the chat. So we did just get a question in on the chat from Trevor, and he's asking, Chris, can you discuss the specific changes to the document? I understand the question was asked, but I don't believe it was answered. And I can start, and then Chris, if you want to take it from where I leave off. So there really isn't changes. So we're not changing the ordinance at all, and so therefore we're not really adding anything different to what's already existing. We're just clarifying any questions that people may have about what they can and cannot do to architectural features on the exterior of their home. And I don't know if you have a specific question, Trevor, about anything in the document, which we're happy to answer. Chris, I don't know if you want to have a follow-up to that as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure which document he's referring to. I'm assuming it's you had a very brief set of design guidelines. That was like the 2 pages or something.
Yeah, we had like 2 pages from
Yeah,
probably 1960.
So the idea is that this just goes in far more detail, into way more detail than what they had in the couple of pages of guidelines. This really is very specific on all the kinds of different architectural features that are significant to the district, and is really meant to be able to be a very user-friendly document for anyone proposing a project in the district, and also a document that's going to be very useful for the district commission. The idea that just because it's going to get everyone onto the same page in terms of understanding the kinds of projects that are most likely to be approved by the district commission.
Hey guys, I'm here. Sorry for that. Well, I understand that there's no, material changes, but there are changes. So in terms of the language, making it more clear, can you kind of like explain what that means and maybe give a couple examples, or point out, in the document, I'm looking at the working draft from November 22nd, 2021. I mean, obviously it's an update of some sort. So, if it's language I guess, what do you mean by that? I understand that the changes were made and they're not material, but there must be, an example of a type of change that you've made.
I would say it's really all about clarifying things and providing more detail. I can't really think of anything.
When you clarify and provide more detail, like what have you, like in which parts of this document have you done that? Because that it's not pointed out. I mean, there's no strike throughs, there's no, no notes or saying that this paragraph became more clarified, that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of.
I see that document is entirely new. So there's what you have in front of you. I'm assuming, so you have the November draft document in front of you. That's entirely new. So there's nothing is striked through because it didn't exist before.
Oh, okay. So this is okay. Well, is there like a certain area of this document that needed to be more clarified? I mean, there must have been a reason why it needed to be clarified. I guess I'm kind of getting at that.
Yeah, so I guess I'll just jump in, Trevor. So as Chris had mentioned, we only had about 2 pages of design guidelines before, and that made it really challenging for the commission, but also residents in the district to really understand what was allowed and what was not allowed in the district. So having this new document is just a comprehensive way to show residents and members of the public what would be permissible in the district and what would not be permissible. We're going into the nitty gritty of everything. So the design guidelines before didn't cover enough information. It was very vague, while these design guidelines in this new document are much more specific, and then therefore hoping that it will provide much more clarification to residents in the districts. I hope that makes sense and answers your question.
No, I got it. So it went from 2 pages to 72 pages.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You got it.
So even though 72 pages sounds like a lot, the idea is that it is very user friendly in that you can just flip through it and quickly kind of see if it's a porch question, a deck question, walls, trim, doors, that you can easily flip to that page and see exactly what you need to know.
Gotcha. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. All right, everybody. Any further questions or comments for us here this evening? So you're welcome to email me at hdc@cityofnorwich.org if you have any questions or comments regarding the design guidelines. I also wanted to mention that this meeting is being recorded and will also be available for viewing on the Historic District Commission's webpage. So if you wanted to come back and watch the meeting and watch the presentation again, you're more than welcome to do so. If you'd like a copy of the slides from tonight's presentation, I'm sure Chris will be happy to send me that, and I'm happy to forward that on to anybody who is interested. And like we said before, we're looking for any comments or feedback by January 5th. I know that is right around the holidays, so we could stretch it a little bit if need be, with the hope of January 19th adopting these design guidelines. That's not a hard date. If we need to go into February, that's okay too. If we get a flurry of comments a little bit after January 5th, we can make adjustments as needed. But that is kind of what we're hoping to do here. Any further questions or comments before we move forward in the public hearing to our next agenda item? So you guys are more than welcome to stick around. So you guys are more than welcome to stick around during this public hearing. We're going to then next hold a public hearing on COA 477. You're welcome to stick around. You're also welcome to sign off at this point. After the public hearing, we will have the regular meeting, which is the point in the meeting where the public is no longer able to comment. And this is where the commission will discuss COA 447 and vote accordingly. I just wanted to make sure I have enough time for everybody who has any further comments regarding the information session for Chris or I.
Hello, Reagan. This is
Yeah, hi,
Vincent.
Vincent.
Hi.
Hi.
It took me a long time to finally be able to hear everyone clearly.
Well, we hear you clearly. Yay.
Good, good. So I have a question.
Sure.
I want to begin planning the building of a front staircase for my house, which has been lacking for a very long time. It was taken off by a previous owner. And I want to start designing and planning to have it rebuilt. I think it's must have been a very interesting staircase because from my observation, it probably was the only double staircase in town. I don't see another house with a staircase coming up to the front door. My door is above a basement door, which is at the walk-in level, if you can understand what I'm suggesting.
Yeah.
The front door, the formal front door of the house is above that basement door, and the staircase has been lacking for a very long time. Maybe, well, it wasn't here when I bought the house 18 years ago. So my question is, how do I begin this process?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so my hope is that when we pass the design guidelines, that will be a first step for you as well to start planning your project and to look at some of the proposed material that would be acceptable to use, that sort of thing. Chris, I don't know if you have any thoughts for Vincent. He's got an incredible house, and he's absolutely right about the staircase being very noticeably missing for many, many years. So I can certainly see the need for that.
Which street is your house on, Vincent?
Well, my house is in Norwichtown. It's at 377 Washington Street.
Yep.
It's the Joshua Lathrop house. It's the site of the first apothecary in the state of Connecticut.
All right. There was a staircase when I was a kid.
I had a feeling you were going to say it was on Washington Street. I think I can picture the house. Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
So the what's very interesting about the staircase that was here was that it was a double-sided staircase going up to the front door. And I haven't found anything like that in Norwich. I found 3 of them in Stonington, but I have not seen another house in Norwich with this double staircase. So of course I want to recreate that, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering how I finally, after all these years, finally found a willing carpenter. I wanted to do this about 10 years ago, and I just couldn't get anyone to agree to the project. I finally found someone who might be able to do it for me. And so I want to know, what is the formal first step that I make in in doing this project?
So, Vincent, you're the perfect person to take a look at the draft design guidelines. Glad you're here. Yeah, so please take a look at the draft design guidelines and look at the introductory section there that talks about how the process works for projects. And I'm really curious to hear if that's going to meet all your questions in terms of your pending project. And then flip to the section in the design guidelines that's on I think stairs and steps. Flip to that page and read that section, and then get a sense, is that with a pending project right in front of you, is that going to meet what you're looking for? Is it helpful, or is there some additional language there that you think might be useful?
Well, Reagan, can you email me a copy of that? You said you could direct email to people.
I would be more than happy to. Absolutely.
Okay. But basically what I'm wondering about, I have a very good idea of what it should look like historically speaking. And of course, I'm going to be using wood and make it as 18th century looking as possible. I'm very interested in all of that. But as far as the formalities of the procedure, where do I begin with the formalities? Do I get a license to build first? Do I present you with a design? What are the steps of the formalities in a project like this?
Yeah, definitely. So that's another great question. And we also in the design guidelines have those steps outlined too. But what you can certainly do, Vincent, is if you wanted to even send the commission a draft of your proposed design for feedback, that is certainly workable. That's a good idea. Also, ultimately, you'll need to submit a certificate of appropriateness to the commission down the road. And I'm not positive, you may need a zoning permit. I'm not an expert about zoning, so you may want to just check with the zoning enforcement officer to make sure you don't need any additional documents or permits from him.
Will need zoning.
What was that, Richard?
You will need zoning.
You will need zoning, okay, yeah. And Vincent, I can email you also the zoning enforcement officer's contact information to ask him any questions as well.
All right, very good. Well, send me whatever you can. And I think the city of Norwich would, or at least the historic district here, would love to see the replacement of that staircase because it's been missing for a long, long time. And the house looks strange with this floating door in the front.
Yeah. I will tell you, Vincent, every time I give a tour and I walk by, everyone's like, why is the door so high and where is the stairs? So
well, that's the thing. And they'd all be so surprised on how difficult it is to get someone to do this project, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But I want to finally, now that I finally have a willing contractor, I want to really try to get it done. And you know, I want to make sure that I do it to everyone's approval. I'm sure everyone will approve of a beautiful built staircase in front of my house.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to do it while I still own the house so that I can enjoy it myself.
Absolutely.
So please send me whatever information you think I would profit from reading, and then I will proceed.
Will do. I will send you an email tomorrow if that works for you.
Great. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. So any further questions or comments regarding the design guidelines? Because I would like to move on in the public hearing to COA 477, excuse me, in a moment. Any further questions? And like I said, if you do have questions, please email me and I'd be happy to get in touch with you and provide you any additional information. Okay, so I'm going to move on here in the public hearing to COA 477, which is 17 Harlan Road, and this is a roofing application. Is there anyone here speaking on behalf of COA 477? I'll ask one more time. Is there anyone here speaking on behalf of COA 477, 17 Harlan Road? Is there anyone here to speak on behalf of COA 477, 17 Harlan Road? Hearing none, I'm going to move on. At this time, I am going to close the public hearing and open the regular meeting. Just so the public knows, you're welcome to stick around for this portion of the meeting, but it is not mandatory or required. If the public does choose to stay and listen, please note that you are no longer able to comment on any of the agenda items that were featured in the public hearing. So you're welcome to just listen, but can no longer provide additional comments. So I'm going to close the public hearing at 6:29 p.m. and open up the regular meeting. So the first item on our agenda is action on COAs. So I would entertain a motion to approve COA 477 as submitted. Is there a motion?
I so move.
Thanks, Greg. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Richard. Any discussion?
Seems pretty straightforward. It's replacing like for like.
Agreed.
Okay.
Any
Vote.
further comments or discussion? Hearing none, I will ask for the roll call vote, and I will just go where you guys are in my screen here. So I'll start with you, Greg Farlow,
Aye.
Richard,
Pass.
Aye.
Greg Johnson,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
and Regan, aye. So the motion passes unanimously. Thank you all so much. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the Wednesday, November 17th, 2021 regular meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Thank you so much, Greg Farlow. Is there a second?
I read them. I did.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion, but I'm going to abstain from the vote because I actually didn't see the minutes attached, so I must have missed them someplace.
Actually, I had that same problem, Regan. I went to my papers again just before this to review, and I can't even find the minutes. I don't think I ever got them.
Uh-oh. Okay. So what we could always do if
They were buried in an email.
I thought I saw them.
Can't saw them, but they were buried in an email.
I could be wrong.
so what I could do is
Multi-layer.
we could
Yeah.
we could make a motion instead to table the minutes to adopt at the next meeting if that works for everybody, so you can have time to read them.
That should be fine unless enough people have seen it to get a proper vote. I don't know if that's the case.
Doesn't look that way.
So how about we
When I withdraw that right
Take a
now. And
look and I'll see if I can find them.
so then let's
Let-
entertain.
I would move we postpone it. I just looked back again through all the emails I got from Catherine, and it had the agenda and the call for the meeting and the design
Yeah.
guidelines, but I never saw any minutes attached any place. So
Okay, so let's make a motion then to postpone the
Table
minutes, to table the minutes to the next regular meeting. Is there a motion?
I will.
I so move.
Okay, and I'll second it then.
So Nancy
Okay.
made the motion and then Greg Johnson seconds. Great, thank you. Any further discussion?
no,
Hearing none, I'll do the roll call vote. So I'll start with you, Greg Farlow,
aye,
Richard.
we're here.
What was that, Richard? I didn't hear you.
Aye.
Thank you, sorry. Greg Johnson
Aye.
I
and Nancy,
Aye.
and I also vote aye, so the motion passes unanimously. Thank you all. We will address this at the next meeting. I have nothing further to comment under Chairman's report, only just wanting to say thank you to Chris for being here this evening and appreciate all his help on the design guidelines. So it's been awesome.
thanks, Chris.
Hey, my
Hey,
pleasure.
there's still there's a couple of placeholders for pictures in there, so I guess there's still some additional pictures that are going to be inserted.
I think I was still missing a couple of photos, maybe on decks especially, but there might have been something else. I
Yeah,
think
I
I
don't-
think I've got those now.
Okay.
Yeah. But you can comment if you'd like some additional photos somewhere else that I'm missing anything,
You know, I have done
your
I have
house or
done-
something.
I have done a quick skim of it. I did not see my house in there, which is okay. But there's a lot there, a lot of great information. I have not had time to read it thoroughly. I just noticed that there are some gray boxes with no pictures. Yeah. And I did
Hmm.
notice that there was no picture of a federal architecture.
I think I struggled finding one.
We haven't found a federal that really meets the sort of what the quintessential look of a federal. So we can probably put something in that's in that time period.
Mm.
Because there are some properties listed that are built around that time that would still be considered federal. I
Yeah.
just haven't seen anything that actually really sort of jumps out as yes, that's a federal style.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes, so members of the commission, please send me any comments, thoughts, questions, etc. regarding the design guidelines. You have the same deadline as January 5th as everybody else. So
Our Christmas
please look-
vacation work.
yeah, there you go. Exactly. It's Christmas vacation work.
Reagan, before you sign off on that property, the apothecary house, Cam said it did have a double set of stairs. She remembers them from when she was a child. They were very plain, no railing, but they have other standards now. Okay, just
Yeah.
want to let you know it was there.
Yeah, that's cool. That's great.
She remembers it as a kid. Okay,
By the house all the time.
she keeps putting me on.
If anything further under old business or new business, I'll just state that the next regular meeting is Wednesday, January 19th, 2022, which is scary. How is it 2022 already? Are there any further comments to bring before the commission or any other thoughts to bring before the commission at this time? All right, hearing none, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Greg. Is there a second? Was that you, Richard?
Yeah,
Thank
I
you,
guess
sorry.
I gotta turn my mic up.
That's okay. Any discussion on adjourning?
No.
All right, hearing none, I'm gonna do the roll call vote one last time. So Greg Farlow, I'll start with you. Although you're muted, my friend.
I get excited. Okay, aye.
Thank you. Richard,
Aye.
Greg Johnson,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
and I as well. Thank you all. We are adjourned. We will see you next month, and I hope everyone has a happy holiday if I don't see you in person
Yeah.
before then.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Thank you.
Merry
Merry
Christmas.
Christmas.
Bye.
Great
Bye
evening,
now.
everybody. Chris, thanks for being
Bye.
here.
Sure, my
Thanks.
pleasure. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Adios. Bye.